We don't follow these rules because we're trying to earn his favor. We follow these parameters because they're for our good. They're for us to have peace and promise. Welcome back to the NIV Application Bible Podcast. Man, this is already getting to be fun, and it just gets better and better and better and better. We're looking at the book of Exodus today, and sometimes you hear Exodus, you think, oh, this is going to be hard. It is filled with hope. Now, secondly, when I say 10 Commandments, some of y'all are going to flinch. I mean, maybe when you think of the 10 Commandments, you just think, I am in so much trouble. That's what my little girl thought. When I brought Missy home from Haiti, English, she had to learn English when she was almost 5 years old. And so she would get nervous when she didn't get the laws of English just right. And then compound that with the fact that she was in a Christian school. She came home from school one day in the first grade and she said, Mama, I'm scared. And I said, why are you scared, baby? And then she explained in kind of, rudimentary English, still some Creole thrown in, that her Bible class had talked about the 10 Commandments. And she told me she was afraid she wouldn't get the rules right. And I thought, how can I explain to Missy the context of these parameters and promises that we call the 10 Commandments? Because I grew up in church speaking English, and I thought they were punitive rules for a long time too. And I thought, I'm going to take her to the bowling alley. We're not big bowlers, but I found the best illustration for the 10 Commandments at the bowling alley. You know how they have those felt bumpers for little kids? They bring those felt bumpers down so that their balls won't land in the gutter. We bowled that night, and I said, baby, that's what the 10 Commandments are. The 10 Commandments aren't rules the way you're thinking of rules. The 10 Commandments are like those felt-covered bumpers, because God's plans for us, his sons and daughters, they include promise and hope. But sometimes we don't bowl very well. And he knows we'll land in the gutter because if we follow our crooked hearts, sometimes we get in trouble. So he established these parameters, these boundaries, if you will, that will help our balls go straight so that we actually win the game of life. And you see that here in Exodus chapter 20. Some people wince when they hear that because the beginning of Exodus 20 is where God gives his people those promises and those parameters we call the 10 Commandments. I'm not going to reiterate those. You probably remember most of those, but I do want to read the P.S. in Exodus chapter 20 to the 10 Commandments. When the people saw the thunder and lightning and heard the trumpet and saw the mountain in smoke, they trembled with fear. They stayed at a distance and said to Moses, speak to us yourself and we will listen, but do not have God speak to us or we will die. See, they thought like Missy did and like so many of us did. They're rules. And if we don't follow him purposely, he's going to fry us into grease spots of oblivion. Moses, you can talk to us, but we'd rather you talk to God and then just come back and tell us what he says because we're afraid we're in trouble. That's, of course, my exegesis, not exactly what this says. Moses said to the people, verse 20, do not be afraid. God has come to test you so that the fear of God will be with you to keep you from sinning. The people remained at a distance while Moses approached the thick darkness where God was. And then here's the P.S. This is my favorite part. Verse 22, then the Lord said to Moses, tell the Israelites this, you have seen for yourselves, that I have spoken to you from heaven. Do not make any gods to be alongside me. Do not make for yourselves gods of silver or gods of gold. Make an altar of earth for me and sacrifice on it your burnt offerings and fellowship offerings, your sheep and goats and your cattle. Whenever I cause my name to be honored, I will come to you and bless you. If you make an altar of stones for me, do not build it with dressed stones, for you will defile it if you use a tool on it. And do not go up to my altar on steps, or your private parts may be exposed. Y'all, this is such a relational God. His people are afraid. They think they'll break the rules and get in trouble. And he basically comes to him and says, I'm a relational God. He says, don't build altars of gold. In other words, you don't have to be fancy. You can build an altar of earth. Just use what you have. Bring your sheep. Bring your cattle. In other words, don't come to me as imposters. Bring me all of you. Bring me your problems. Bring me your disputes. I used to wonder what it meant by him saying, don't build it with dressed stones. I thought, what even does that mean, dressed stones? During COVID, I had some really aggressive Amazon drivers. I live out in the boonies in Tennessee, and they kept cutting across the front of my property and making these big ruts. And because I don't have the gift of mercy, I decided I was going to build a tiny little wall so that it would keep them from ruining my yard. But I couldn't afford a really fancy wall. And so I asked the guy who built it, I said, can you just do it out of, just the concrete blocks from Home Depot, but can you make it pretty? And he said, I absolutely can. I can actually get these facades of real stone. It's only about a half an inch thick, but I can glue those on and it will look like a real rock wall, but it'll just cost you like less than half that price. And I said, let's do it. Later on, after they built that wall, I thought that is a pretty wall and it's keeping those Amazon drivers from ruining my yard. I was thinking about that wall, thinking about this passage, and then I was at a women's conference during that same season. And God just showed off at this women's conference. It was incredible what was happening. Women were putting their hope in Jesus Christ. There were marriages that were being restored. I mean, it was really incredible. And so I said to the woman next to me during a time of musical worship, I said, man, this is awesome. And she said, oh no, it's not about me. It's all about Jesus. And I thought, ma'am, I wasn't even thinking about you until you brought you up. And I thought, oh, that's what he was talking about. When we try to pretend like we're the prize, like we're the pretty rock wall when really we're just concrete, we get the glory instead of the Lord. He's telling his people, you're in relationship with me. You don't have to pretend. And remember, I'm the prize. I've initiated a relationship with you. At the very end, I mean, that is a funny verse. And do not go up to my altar on steps, or your private parts may be exposed. When people tell me the Bible's boring, I'm like, you are kidding me. This is way more colorful than Netflix. Back then, in this ancient era, men didn't have, I'll say, Haynes his way. And so they only had outer robes. He's such a practical God. He's like, if you go up steps, you're going to expose a little more than you had planned. The whole point here is, I love you. I've got you. I will cover you. Y'all, these aren't rules as much as they are parameters for our good. They're not punitive. They're promissory. He loves us. Remember, we're not slaves. We're his children. Yes, there's discipline. When we go outside of the good boundary lines God has for us, there's all kinds of chaos and calamity. But he doesn't give us these parameters because he's mad at us. He gives us these parameters because he doesn't want us to play in the street and get hit by a truck. I had to explain that to Missy too. She didn't have traffic in Haiti. She was so little when I brought her home. We had a rule that she always had to hold my hand in a parking lot. That's not because I'm mad at my kid. It's because I love this little girl. I didn't want her to become a pancake in the Target parking lot. That's these parameters. He loves us. Listen to this application point about the 10 commandments, the 10 parameters that make up this beautiful, beautiful relationship we get to have with our Creator Redeemer. As we apply the 10 commandments, it is important that we keep in mind what they are. They are a charter of conduct for a people already redeemed. Say that again for the back row. They are a charter of conduct for a people already redeemed. We don't follow these rules because we're trying to earn his favor. We follow these parameters because they're for our good. They're for us to have peace and promise. They are, in other words, commands of God to be understood in a redemptive context that defines their declaration in the Old Testament and restatement in the New Testament. these are not, they're not punitive rules. They're like those felt bumpers at the bowling alley. They're for our good. They're so that our lives and the lives of the people we love won't end up in the gutter, because this is not a rule book. This isn't primarily a code of ethics. At its core, it's a love story. Lean into it. It'll change your life.